Okay, welcome to Buyers Counseling Session for March the 15th, 2015. So what we're going to do today, you'll want to make sure you have a current version of the Buyer's Guide in front of you, because this is your prop for the counseling session. You'll also want to have the Waller Group Buyer Script Book in front of you. So the Buyer Script Book, and specifically page 30. Because page 30 acts as kind of a guide for the process as far as the process that we follow on the counseling session. And then I think it's a good habit, a good best practice to always have the vendor list with you as well. So those are the three items that you want to have as a resource for this class. And one of the things that here we are moving into the spring market. So we're going to talk relative to seasonality and moving into the spring market. Keep in mind, seasonality, it makes a difference depending on what market you're moving in. But for this class, this session is going to be the beginning of the spring market. The other thing I wanted to do to put this in context is when I was an agent, I actually started as a buyer's agent when I first got in the business. So I was always taught to conduct these buyer counseling sessions, and I did a pretty pathetic job of doing that. And it's because I didn't really understand the why behind the counseling session. And we were also in a completely different market. We're in an extremely hot seller's market. So if you're not conducting appropriate buyer counseling sessions in this market, then you're not only doing yourself a disservice, you're doing a disservice to your buyer. And also wasting a lot of time by not setting the proper expectations. About 80 to 90% of the value of a buyer counseling session is setting the appropriate expectations for buyer. So before you can set appropriate expectations, a lot of times you have to diffuse what the buyer's perceptions are, whether they're false or why they have the perceptions they do about the marketplace. So you have to ask a lot of questions to find out where their mind is, how realistic are they, before you can really educate them on or know how you need to educate your buyer. A great buyer counseling session is a consultation, and a consultation is delivering value to someone, and you can't deliver that value unless you understand where they're coming from and exactly what they're looking for. So this personality profiles are also important to have an awareness of those. That's also in the Waller Script Book, the Buyer Script Book. It identifies the 4 different types of buyer personality profiles. That's much more important, I've found, in buyer sessions than it is in listing sessions. So with that being said, let's go ahead and go through a sample buyer consultation presentation. So there's 3 steps to the presentation. Number 1 is you want to pre-qualify and condition the buyer. Typically, this is done over the phone. So this is page 30 of the Waller Group Script Book. So this, whether it's an up-desk call, whether it's a pipeline lead, whether it's a personal referral, so the first thing you always want to do before you spend time with that buyer is pre-qualify and condition over the phone. So you're conditioning their motivation, how motivated are they to buy, and you're also conditioning their financial ability. Are they qualified financially? Number 2, so step number 2, upon mortgage approval confirmation, or you have a pretty good understanding that they are approved for their loan, or they have a proof of funds or paying cash. Once you've isolated that, then you'll go ahead and set the first showing appointment, which would also include the buyer consultation. Now, in an ideal situation, you'd have a buyer consultation that's separate from the showing appointment. What happens in real life, Venus and I were talking about this yesterday, is so many times these take place maybe at a cocktail party, maybe it's over lunch because they're friends. So it becomes a real personal situation. So that's why knowing your value proposition in the buyer counseling session, if you're a really good agent, you've already fully presented your value proposition and fully coached and prepared your buyers, because they're usually friends, or you've spent enough time casually or informally, and you've been able to convey a lot of this information we're going to talk about today. So that's another reason you don't see a lot of formal buyer counseling sessions. But if it's a pipeline lead, or if it's a referral, someone that you don't know, then these counseling sessions are very, very critical. Okay, so we explain step by step in the buyer script book as far as what you want to explain. Number 1, the current market conditions. And number 2, the offer and the negotiation process. And then the preferred buyer agreement. So that's what we're going to go through today. And that process usually takes between 10 to 20 minutes, depending on if it's a first-time home buyer or how experienced that buyer is. We'll probably talk today within the realm of what would be usually a first-time home buyer. I'm going to go over a lot of the information that would normally be addressed to first-time home buyers because you guys would know that. So what I want to highlight today are the things that are really relative to today's market, and also the Waller Group. What's different about the Waller Group? What's different about the Waller Group value proposition? What's different about the process? So that would be on page 3 of the buyer's guide. And this has just been revised in the last week. So the goal of the Waller Group is to deliver remarkable customer service experiences through highly trained agents with exceptional market knowledge of their local respective markets. We're going to talk a lot about that. And that's something you want to always be dripping on with your buyers as far as how you are, how familiar you are with the local market. So that's facilitated in these 4 ways. Number 1, the Waller Group Buyer's Guarantee. We're going to talk about that more in the buyer counseling session. Also, the complimentary moving boxes and moving services. Also, our preferred partner network, which includes savings for household items, repairs, rehab services, and that the vendors that are on that, a lot of the vendors are on the preferred vendor list. That's why I think having that in front of you to give to your client at the end of that session is a great value add benefit. You're probably not familiar with the savings for household items. We don't really talk about that very much, but for me personally, my buyers, this goes for any of our Waller Group buyers, but Mitchell Gold, which is on McKinney Avenue, they're a great furniture store that's modern furniture. They have a $150 gift certificate for all Waller Group buyers. That's something you can include in your closing package if it's something that if they'll be buying furniture from there. Restoration Hardware, for all Waller Group buyers, they get a 20% discount through our contact at Restoration Hardware. So that's just one of the value add benefits of using our preferred vendors and contractors. We also back this, and this is supported by our customer satisfaction survey. This is real important that you explain up front in that counseling session how important these surveys are. David Weekly Homes, I had a meeting with them a few weeks ago, and they were explaining they get a 65% return rate on their surveys. It's because their salespeople are trained to condition that buyer up front in that first session, the importance of completing that survey after closing. So that's something that you can do a better job getting Trulia and Zillow reviews, which help you tremendously online if you ask for it up front at the beginning of that session in the survey. So client testimonials, of course, you want to insert your own client testimonials, and then also benefits of working with a Waller Group agent. Now, this is the nuts and bolts. So many pre-templated seller guides and buyer guides don't have what I call real meat to the presentation. There is a lot of very specific to the Waller Group material that's in this, and it's important to understand how you facilitate each of these items. It's very similar on the other side to the Waller Group marketing plan when you have a listing that you're taking, knowing how to facilitate that marketing plan. Very similar on the buyer presentation when you're going through the Waller Group buyer guide, how to facilitate Waller Group buyer benefits. So the number one, the most important point to make is you'll have the largest inventory of homes for sale to choose from when you use one of our agents. Did you know that almost 20% of the homes we sell are not listed online or advertised to the public? Many of the best homes sell first and never make it to market. Now, why is that? It's like I said in this morning's class, if you don't explain the why in the pre-printed material, then you'll lose the interest of the buyer. If you're just reading the material, you'll lose them. So you have to explain why the best homes sell first. So, Nina, Anaid, what would you say? Why would you say the best homes sell first?
Then why do they sell first?
Why are the best homes never making it to the MLS? Maybe that's the way I should ask it.
Probably because they're in excellent condition, the price is good.
The
Great.
agent's already pre-marketing it to the other agents,
Right.
or they already have buyers.
Right. So the most common response is the condition. They're going to be the homes that are in the best condition. Well, they're usually preparing it for market. So it may take 7 to 10 days just to have it photographed. It may take 2 weeks to 6 weeks just for their paint, carpet, what they're doing to prepare it for the market. Well, a good agent is going to pre-market that home. And we work with a lot of good agents in the community through our Facebook networks and through the networks that we have peer-to-peer. We identify a lot of these premium homes for our buyers. And when we're able to show them and get into that property before it hits the MLS, then it gives you a huge advantage. And that's one of the benefits you'll have working with a Waller Group agent. So it's important for that buyer to understand that up front. The relationships with other top listing agents in the area. For sale by owner daily notifications, we subscribe to a service that, and this is there again, you'll explain to why this is important. We have a service that notifies us of all the for sale by owners each day. So that way we immediately know in real time. We also market your needs through and showing them that I have a buyer and also the closed realtor Facebook network. So just mention, you'll want to give a few samples, the Real Estate Friends Network, the North of LBJ Realtors Network, the different counties and different areas where there's closed Facebook networks. The consumer doesn't have access to that. Those are only for realtors. So explaining how there's a lot of transactions that just happen on Facebook that aren't even available to the buyer or seller. Flyers and direct mail postcards. So those are some of the ways that we find properties, we identify properties, and that's one of the benefits you have working with a Waller Group agent. So number 2, the negotiating skills. This is an extremely important point. Working with a buyer is explaining how if you don't put your best foot forward and if you don't make the best offer, then we never even have a chance to renegotiate the contract for closing. And I've seen so many buyers get so hung up on the offer price and they mistake the offer price for the closing price. Keep in mind, the offer price is just the first hurdle. Let's just get, when we're competing in an auction, we just have to be competitive, get our offer accepted. And then we can do our inspections and we can look at, will this thing even appraise for that price? Is it worth the money? But we never even have an opportunity to have that conversation if we can't get our offer accepted. So number 1, get our offer accepted, and then we can work towards closing and maybe sharpen the pencil depending on the appraisal and other factors. This also depends on the price point. If you're in a price point that's between, well, up to, I would say about 350,000, then you have to prepare them for an auction type situation. So are they familiar with buying homes in an auction? How that works is that usually homes in the auction, the way that works is that you have multiple bidders and the auctioneer is going to bid it up as high as possible, and then they take offers from the top 3, and the first person with the highest offer, and then normally it's just price, the highest price, then they win that. So then that buyer has the option to move forward. We don't even have that option to move forward if we don't have the highest price. So you really want to educate them on how the auction process works when you're in a multiple offer situation. So to prepare them, to coach them, to make an offer that's over list price, that is a conversation you have to have in that buyer counseling session up front. You don't want to have that after you find the property. If you find a property, then their emotions are already attached to it. It's too late. It's hard for them to make a quick decision. There's a lot of stress involved. So that's why you have to have this conversation before you identify a property. So what we do, a Waller Group agent, we're going to prepare you with leading indicators to make better decisions in regard to preparing your offer. So what are some of the leading indicators that we've talked about? Employment. Right. So knowing these different headquarter relocations that are coming in, how that makes an impact. Toyota, for example. Toyota's moving 4,000 people here. So to give you some perspective, there were only 5,000 sales in all of North Texas for the month of February. Here they're moving 4,000 people here, and you know how many they've moved so far? 54 people. So we haven't even seen the beginning. They just broke ground on the facility. Plano hasn't even seen, Collin County and Plano and Frisco hasn't even seen the beginning of where prices are going. Now let's look at Richardson, for example. Richardson State Farm was announced almost 2 years ago. They're just now moving these employees in. Well, look at the Richardson market now. It's half a month's inventory. Like we said in this morning's meeting, that is the lowest inventory. That's the hottest market in all the Metroplex. Well, we knew that was going to happen 2 years ago. Same thing is going to happen in Frisco and in Plano now with Toyota. Right now, just the last 6 weeks, we've had all these announcements for downtown Dallas with these tech jobs that are moving in. So, and there's a new high rise, a skyscraper. There's so much going on in downtown Dallas now. So these are things that will impact the market 2 years down the road. So that's important to understand leading indicators. Pending sales, showing them the pending sales. That's a faster indicator of where the market's going. If there's a lot of pending sales versus active inventory, how many months inventory? So that's the conversation you need to have. The length of that conversation will depend on how resistant they are to offering. What I would suggest is offering, if they're in those price points under about $350, or if it's just a hot market, less than about 2 months inventory, then they need to be prepared to offer about a 90-day higher price than what the current list price is. Does that make sense? So if prices are moving up, let's say in the Metroplex prices moved up 12% last year. So that's 3% a quarter. So that's 1% a month. So they need to offer 3% more, which is 90-day snapshot of where the market's going. By the time they close on the loan and they move in the house, it's already worth what otherwise, if they sit and they want to wait until they see something else for the next house, every month it's going up an extra 1%. So the question you want to ask your buyer is, if we lose this house, is that something you're comfortable with? Because I know I can't replace this house at how fast they're moving. I won't be able to find you another house that compares. And get their affirmation, and they have to sell themselves on it. And you have to ask those questions before sometimes they'll make that decision. Okay. That's part of your negotiating skills, and this is just a perfect example of setting their expectation and the expectations that you set up front. Expert agent communication skills with best-in-class practices, providing preferential status when competing against other offers. So the experience that we bring to the table, and my broker who's sold thousands of homes, he's very involved in our negotiating process. So I talk to him many times on the individual negotiations that we have. And many times we're going to be competing with 4 or 5 other agents and offers. And the communication that I have with the listing agents is essential. And many times that's how deals are won or lost, is how quick that communication is and how effective the communication is and how much confidence they have. So here's a tip for you. I was talking to an agent about this earlier, is that have the loan officer also call the listing agent. Have the loan officer call and emphasize to the listing agent, this is a very well qualified buyer. I've pulled their credit. I've also verified their income and their employment. I've reviewed their tax returns. I can just guarantee you have my word, in addition to the approval letter, this is a very good buyer. And that the more reiterations and more supporting documentation you have for your buyer, then the higher probability their offer will be accepted, pending you have a higher price. The price needs to be competitive as well. Okay, complementary moving services. So this is going into the value add. This is where I always have the conversation of, we want to be your easy button. There's a lot of stresses that happen around the move. It's hard enough to get a loan, much less dealing with the stress of moving. So our goal at the Waller Group is to streamline that. Any Waller Group agent, we can send you moving boxes, packing tape, packing items, markers. That's just one of the things that we do for all of our buyers and sellers. And so you just let us know when you're ready. We'll send those boxes out. We also have preferred discounts with different different vendors. And that's when you can go into some people can move for free, in essence, if it's their first home. So this, what is your time worth illustration, is really more of I would say, an objection handler. So if they give you the objection, we want to look ourselves, or we want to represent ourselves, then that's something that you definitely want to have as a tool in your tool belt. The real cost of renting, there again, this is more of a prop that's to be almost an objection handler. This would be the objection handler to someone that says, oh, we want to wait. We're just not, we just renewed our lease and we just don't, we were looking, but now we're not interested. Well, let's take a look at this real cost of renting, how the payment stays the same. Renting has gone up, has increased in the Metroplex about 5% a year. Asking them, this is where the fundamental sales class with us is so important, understanding just the sales process, because this is where you're selling them on the benefits of home ownership. As a realtor, as a good realtor, you're always selling the client. You're selling them in many, many different ways throughout the transaction, throughout the process. So this is when you're actually selling them on the home, not necessarily on the specific property, but you're just selling them on home ownership. Does that make sense? So explaining how, okay, how long have you lived in the property? How much has the rent gone up since you lived there? Well, if you're to live there another 10 years, how much would that be? Well, that's this much money, X amount of dollars that you've paid for rent on a 30-year mortgage, then it would stay the same. Your mortgage, your principal and interest would stay the same. So illustrating that, sometimes showing them over a time and a horizon period is real important. New construction, why buy? These are all just props in there. The step-by-step of the buying process and showing them the chart. This is very good for first-time home buyers. First-time home buyers, so many times they don't know where in the process they are, to where when you use this chart as a prop, it's very good. Another thing is the loan application checklist. This buyer's guide, just like our seller's guide, is meant to be a very comprehensive resource tool. So that way you can pull and select different documents out of this and send it to them when it's appropriate. So you may have some people that you're just starting to pre-qualify and you send them the loan application checklist. You may have people that are under contract and then you're going to send them the moving checklist. So, which is towards the back. So these are things that you want to keep in mind. What I would do is I would pull out these as separate documents and send them throughout the process. Now, I want to talk about the most important part of the buyer counseling session, and that is your Waller Group Buyer's Guarantee. This is a variation of what I did 12 years ago when I was a buyer's agent, because so many people were, when you sign a 4-page legal document on the buyer rep agreement, it's intimidating for some buyers. And this is less intimidating, and it also kind of reminds you of all the value that you bring to the transaction. So you have to understand yourself, everything that you're doing for these buyers. And 10 years ago, a lot of these things were not necessary. In this market, for you to identify property for your buyer, it's necessary to do a lot of these things. So it's important to know how to do it and why you're doing it. So number one, our preferred lenders, their best rate and on-time closing guarantee. So we explain service first, prospect mortgage, their contact information, and then go ahead and explain the exclusions of that guarantee. That if they cannot match the rate and terms upon receipt of a good faith estimate, then our brokerage, Logan Waller, he will write a check for $200 at closing on the settlement statement. So that's on the settlement statement if they can't match the terms of another lender. If they are closing late, so let's say they do match it, but they're late, then he'll also write a check for $200 on the settlement statement. Now, this is the caveat, is that anytime the lender asks for documents, they need to have the documents to the lender within 48 hours. Because usually that's what delays closings, is when the buyers don't have their documents when they have a request. So I just want to prepare you now. Lenders have more guidelines now than ever to follow. And so there's requests throughout the transaction you're going to have. So make sure you're proactive in getting those requests fulfilled to the lender as soon as possible when they need something, because otherwise that could delay your closing. So there again, setting that proper expectation up front. Okay, so we will set up the most comprehensive and accurate automated property search notification, ensuring you have real-time notification of new MLS property listings. So again, anybody can read that off of there, but let's tell them why. What is the difference in our MLS gateway searches versus what they can find on Zillow or Ebby.com? What are the differences? It's real time, right? These are immediately, they're immediately notified. So make sure you click when you set up that search for them, that they're notified ASAP immediately. It's not every 24 hours or every twice a day. Because in this market, this is the perfect time to, there again, set their expectation, let them know if they're in that price point under about 350, then whenever they get a new listing notification, you text me the time you want to look at it. Don't worry about my schedule. Don't worry about trying to work around me, or we just need to get to that property as soon as possible. And you just text me the time you want to see it. And make sure that it's very clear with your buyers, because sometimes hours and minutes count, right? Will make a difference. So that is real important that you set that expectation up front. Yeah.
Another thing, with buyers is when they are in the gateway, they're noticing the change of status. So even if they don't believe you that the market is crazy,
Right.
they'll like a property, they'll favorite it, and then they'll see the status change.
Yeah.
So they're actually getting an idea of what's happening in the market without you even having to.
Right.
You've explained it, but now they actually see it once they're on that gateway.
Right. And explaining that once we have a verbal acceptance, normally it's another day, sometimes 2 days before it's changed to MLS. So that's why sometimes these things go in hours. And if you're using Evi.com or Zillow or some other tool, you're notified first thing in the morning and it was listed yesterday, then, you know, that's where I'm an agent that I want to be out there on the first day. So we get our offer the night before. We have a response time by noon the next day. I had a deal myself just a few months ago that happened, and they had to offer 7,000 to 10,000 over what they accepted because I put a response time by noon the next day. And I was out there looking at that property the same day with my buyer. It was a low price point fossil. So I was able to say my buyer, it's real easy to show, you know, hey, I saved you, I think it's $7,000. And that listing agent, they were screwed. They had already accepted our offer and they couldn't take that other offer. So in fact, they got 2 other offers after that. So that's why putting a response time and being in on the first day, if it's under 350,000, depending on where you are, it's real important. Okay, so the closed Facebook groups exclusive to realtors. Oh, back to the MLS property search. We also have more criteria that we can enter on that MLS gateway. So if you want a master down instead of up, if you want a house with a lake view, or if you want, then those are all filters, and there's many, many other filters. If you want to pool the spa, things like that we can put on our gateway, to where there's limited information that you can put as far as specific criteria that's in any other consumer interfaced search. Okay, so we'll market your buyer needs online through closed Facebook groups exclusive to realtors, the geo-targeted pay-per-click campaigns to homeowners within certain areas, and the MLS reverse prospecting system. So let them know on the MLS reverse prospecting system, this allows other realtors to contact us when there's a new listing that meets your criteria. And the pay-per-click campaigns we usually do on higher price point properties. So we have that written in the fine print if it's over $400,000. AdWorks is the vendor, that's the company I would use for the pay-per-click campaign. Put your buyer's criteria just as you would on the I Have a Buyer flyer. Jeremy prepares that, and it'll be an AdWorks ad. They normally run about $50 a month, so it gives you an idea. This also helps you secure more listings in your GeoFarm. So that's a dual benefit if it's in your GeoFarm, and I would suggest those AdWorks campaigns in your GeoFarm. We will market your home needs with a print and voice version through calling. I call the top agents and ask them what they have coming up. I have a buyer right now. I was on the phone yesterday calling agents in this area because I know who sells luxury high-rise. And there's only about 4 agents in Dallas that really specialize in high-rise condo between $1 million plus. So I was on the phone with them, and everything that I've found is basically not in the MLS. So this is typical of if you're doing your job, then you will find properties that are not in the MLS. It varies market to market, so that's where it's good. You have to know your specific market. The calling and previewing old expired listings and for sale by owners. This is there again in your GeoFarm, real important for you to do to make sure that you're turning over those stones on the old expired listings for sale by owners. Sprinkling in a few examples of maybe FSBOs you've seen or expireds you've seen that would or would not work for them. Preview homes on the broker tour. We will help identify land and a builder to fit your needs and budget. and we have an internal Waller Group builder list. So it's a database of builders depending on price point and location for you to choose from. So we could work with our brokerage on that, identifying the right builder. And then going into the negotiations. Some of this may be very similar to what you've already explained on the Waller Group, what's different about the Waller Group earlier in your presentation. But we know some buyers have to hear it 2 or 3 times, right?
Yeah.
So that's where you want to say some of these things 2 to 3 different times to constantly remind them. So we'll help you with the negotiations, and we do that by preparing a market trend report in the area of interest, including leading indicators such as pending sales, and we touched on that a little bit earlier. A property history report. This is where RPR, this was new, just launched with NAR, National Association of Realtors, the real property report where you can get history on the property. That point of view property I have for $2 million in Flower Mound, I'm double ending that. The buyers that are buying that, I had a complete report prepared on the neighbors. Who are the neighbors over there? I wanted my buyers to understand who the neighbors are, what their families are like, where do they work, how many kids do they have, where do they go to school. I mean, it's amazing things you can find out online just by hunting around. So I felt like that's something that I needed to do for my buyers, mainly because of the investment that they were making. That's a higher price point, and they lived in a totally different city. They were not familiar with that subdivision. So important to know your neighbors. But that there again, that's part of an agent is being intuitive, not the buyer asking you for things like that, but you just knowing based on where they're coming from and what their needs are. And that's kind of goes into what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago on hospitality versus service. Okay, we'll recommend best services, home inspections, appraisal, home warranty vendors based on prior recommendations of Waller Group buyers and colleagues. So other peers of mine and buyers, we have a list, our vendor list, and this is a really powerful tool for you because so many times it's hard to get bids on a property, especially during that option period, you're in a time crunch. If you're calling Angie's List and you're just trying to find someone off Craigslist, you don't know if they're good or not. And I've seen countless buyers do that and spend wasted hours. Contractors not showing up, getting inadequate service to where our contractors, they show up because we send them a lot of work every month. So they make a lot of money off of our buyers and off of our business that we send. So if they don't show up to prepare a bid, or if they're late, or if they're not returning your call, then we want to know about it so that way we can take a star off their star rating because these are recommended by other people that we work with. So it's real important that you guys contribute to that list and you also use that list and send them business. Okay, we'll present the offer on your behalf to the seller, the builder, the for sale by owner, or the seller's agent. We'll negotiate in your best interest at all times to get you the best deal possible. Well, that sounds like it's pretty generic, right? But it's just good to go ahead and reiterate that. So we also provide the following transaction management services. So this is where I go into kind of the easy button analogy. We want to make it as seamless as possible. And this is where being proactive and intuitive, a good agent will be able to anticipate certain problems. Communicate with all parties, keep them updated weekly, help coordinate repairs, and again, reiterate the moving services. And then they agree to get approved, notify us of any properties you wish to look at. And something, if it's someone you're a little bit nervous about informing you, or then that's where I would get their affirmation. You know, does that make sense? You know, you want to see them acknowledge. It's like, it sounds so goofy every time you're on a flight and they make you acknowledge in the safety seat if you know how to buckle your seatbelt. They make you look at the attendant, they make you nod your head. Well, how many times do we just ignore it and we don't pay attention until they make us do that when we're on that flight? That's the same way with your buyers when you're going through this presentation. The real key important points, you want to get their acknowledgement, you want to see their eyes, and does that make sense? You know, that's a very simple, easy, non-confrontational question to ask. And that's a golden nugget that I would encourage you to use a lot, and through your counseling and through your setting your expectations with your buyers and your sellers, is asking that single question, getting their acknowledgement that makes sense. When you're going through these long presentations, you'll lose them. I guarantee you'll lose them at some point. So that's why those important points are important. Okay, so moving on, the preparing them for the inspection. A lot of this is first-time home buyer information, but we also just added the moving checklist. So this is a moving preparation checklist. It takes them week by week throughout the move. And there's some really great resources on here. So this is, again, something that I would send to them separate when they go under contract. So that way they can start using the resources on this. I'd also highlight, on the moving checklist, we have the contact information for our movers, and we have 3 different moving companies that you can choose from. And I'd explain the pros and the cons between each one. Armstrong is, if you have high value items, Armstrong is probably who I would suggest. Everything will be wrapped individually. If you're more value conscious or price conscious, Brad Dugan, he's a local guy, $75 an hour, and we also pay the first $200. I mean, many times you're going to get the whole move paid for it when you use Brad. Firehouse movers, 3 men in a truck, $100 per hour. They're very reasonable. Rarely ever any complaints on them. And then also throughout the process on the moving boxes, who they contact when they want moving boxes sent to them, the change of address. We have a link on here. All you have to do is click the link if it's in the electronic version of the USPS, the Postal Service, to have their address updated and changed. Also, if they want to contact Goodwill, or if they want to schedule a pickup for things clothes that they don't want, then that can be scheduled on here. Also, the utilities disconnected. We have utility concierge. So again, they just email Kimberly and she can have utilities disconnected at their current residence. To initiate new utilities, she can help with that, or they can go to White Fence. They can compare pricing themselves, and they just click on the link and they can see pricing with all the different utility vendors. Also, some other resources that are on this moving checklist are the driver's license. So this is real important for them to know. After closing, they're penalized. If they don't change their driver's license in 30 days, there's a steep fine they pay. So go ahead and do that now. If you're under contract, just click on the link to the Texas Department of Public Safety, get your driver's license changed. So now we go into the sample buyer contracts, and depending on how experienced they are, you can go into that. So that is the process, the guide, our new updated buyer's guide that you'll want to use. And if you start practicing that and working that into your buyer habits, your habits of working with buyers, then I guarantee you'll be much more efficient with your time, and you'll be able to close more buyers faster and get more offers accepted. So that's the goal. Increase those DIPA activities, dollar income productive activities. And this is a great example of refining and increasing your skill set so that way you're more profitable. Benny, let's do some Q&A and throw me some curveballs. Give me the hardest objections you get. And girls, you guys chime in too if you have anything that's challenging or that's outside of these. But she researched to find out the most common buyer objections. So I thought these were really good.
Well, you know what, Logan? We don't feel like this is the right time to buy. We just don't want to buy at the top of the market.
Okay, I understand that. So why do you feel like this is the top of the market?
Prices are just going crazy and they just keep increasing, and we just don't feel like it's the right time.
Okay. And when do you think that they would be going down, or when do you think the market would be changing?
We haven't really thought about it. We don't know, but we just feel like right now is not the right time.
Okay. So I'm peeling the onion. I'm trying to find out what's caused this perception. It's opposite what's in the newspaper. It's opposite what's kind of generally accepted right now. So I'm trying to figure out why, because it's not really logical, first of all, in this market. So that's where I want to peel the onion as much as I could. If there's no logical explanation that she has, then that's where I'd like to explain why this is a great time to buy. So there's several reasons. Right now we're in the spring market. So historically, about 60 to 65% of the sales actually take place in the spring and the summer months. So as you can imagine, with prices moving up the way they have been, in the next 2 months, we're going to see actually bigger increases than what we've seen in the past. Rents have increased 5% in the last year in the Metroplex. Are you renting right now?
Yes.
Okay. So how long have you been renting?
About 3 years.
3 years. Oh, okay. And how much is your rent?
$1,000.
$1,000. Okay. And how much was it 3 years ago?
About $850.
Wow. Okay. So your your rent, it sounds like is moving up more than the market average. So more like 6%, 7%, sounds like a year. So do you think that your rent will start going down anytime soon?
Probably not.
Well, that's what's so great about buying is that you're locked into a long-term interest rate. So I was listening to a presentation by Warren Buffett a few months ago, and he said that he expected housing to have done better than what it has. And you know, what's interesting is here in Dallas, it's actually one of the hottest housing markets in the nation. And what makes the housing market what it is jobs. So this is where you can use the information I gave you earlier about these headquarter relocations and these thousands of jobs that are coming and what's being announced. This is where it's good to know and to be up to date on what had, like Lancaster, this morning we were talking about the numbers in Lancaster being so off the chart. I guarantee there's probably been a big announcement down there of some big facility or some industrial park that's going in, that's going to be bringing jobs to Lancaster. So jobs dictate where the market's moving. Also the leading indicators like pending sales, showings, and that's where educating you on pending sales and showings is going to be important in isolating that objection. What else can you think of that?
Well, our lease isn't up until October, so I think we're just gonna put a hold on looking.
Okay, I understand that. So what's your penalty if you were to get out of your lease early?
It's about 2 months rent.
2 months rent, okay. So 2 months rent, then that's going to equate to about 2% of the price of the home. You know, if we're just generalizing here.
Right.
So what we've seen the last year, prices increased 12% in the Metroplex. Actually, in the areas that you're looking, in the price point that you're looking at, that $1,000, you're looking at about a $200,000 house. Prices have increased closer to 18% in that price range. So if we wait until October, then April, May, June, July, August, September, October, that's 7 months. So we're looking at a, was that about a 10% price increase? So that's a $20,000 more house. So the house will cost $20,000 more, and you'll have to pay a $2,000 penalty. So it's $18,000 difference. It'll cost you more if you wait. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. Well, do you think if we found the right home today that we could work with that in the apartment complex?
I think so.
Okay. Sometimes we can even get the seller to pay for it, to pay for the termination. Now, in this price range is probably not going to happen, but you're trying to figure out how to isolate these objections. So, what else?
We just have so many friends that are realtors. I think we may end up just going with one of them.
Oh, a friend that's a realtor. Okay, great. And who is it? Are they in this area or how?
They kind of work all over, I think.
Work all over? Oh, okay. Okay. Well, you know, as I explained, these are and that's where I go back. Sometimes you're going to have to, and those objections, they weren't paying attention if you went through your counseling session, where you have to remind them again of what I do in the local area. This is how I find properties in this area, that I know the realtors that are selling. So I call them. You know, a lot of my properties that I sell are not in the MLS, 20 to 30%. And if that comes from having local market knowledge, to where if they their other agents work all over the Metroplex in lots of different areas, they're not going to have access to that 20 to 30% inventory. You know, do you think that your friend, the agent, would cheat you out of 30% of the homes to look at? You know, they want what's best for you. They want you to have the most properties to choose from. So it makes sense to work. You know, a lot of times if I have a buyer that's a friend that's looking sometimes in just a different city, I'll refer them to a different agent, because I want to make sure they're taken care of, and I'm sure your friends would want the same for you. Now, have you been looking at homes with them? Have you seen
Not
any?
really. They've just been sending me homes over the internet.
Oh, okay. So nothing I would offer, this is kind of worst case scenario, but if they have some vested time, if they've actually shown them property, I'd say, you know, we could pay them a referral fee. So I'm happy to pay them a referral fee for the time that they've already spent showing you property. Do you think that'd be fair? Because I'm sure they want what's best for you. They want you to have the most inventory to choose from. So that's why I handle that. Okay.
Well, I don't think we need an agent because we're buying new construction.
Oh, new construction, great. It's amazing how many of the homes that are selling right now outside of the MLS that are new construction. And we have a database of builders just because of that, because there's so much inventory that's outside of the MLS. The challenges that a lot of our buyers see with new construction is that if they have not bought an unfinished home before, knowing the finish out schedules, how they change builder to builder, knowing how some builders will say there's certain items going in the house and then it's not in the contract. So that's, as prices are moving up, builders are very reluctant to commit to those finish out items. And those finish out items, unfortunately, are sometimes the most expensive thing in the house. What kind of stone is going on the countertop? Is it a home marble or is it a Formica? So these are things that are done last at the end of the move, at the end of the construction timeframe, that are really the most important to negotiate. So the way those are negotiated makes a big difference, and that's where I can really help you with that.
Well, my husband's an attorney, so I think we're just going to use him to represent us.
Oh, he's an attorney, great. What does he charge an hour? What's his bill?
300
an hour? Okay. So that's where I'd go and show that what is your time worth, and show her husband or for whoever you're working with, these are, let's take a look at some of these things. And what we've found, and this is just based on an average, but based on an average, about 48 hours to do all these things in a transaction. I mean, from everything from forwarding your address, your postal service address, to picking up moving boxes, finding moving boxes, to confirming the appraisal was ordered, to confirming the closing instructions are on time at the title company. It's a lot of little work, and it's a lot of stuff that your husband would probably gladly pay someone like me closer to $60 an hour. Does that make sense? And so that's where, if your husband was to do this at his rate, it costs about $10,000. So I'm really a bargain. Probably should charge more.
Well, I don't think we want the responsibility that comes along with the upkeep of the home right now.
Okay. Well, condo sales, that's one option, is to explain condos and how condo ownership works. The other option would be the residential service contract, explain how residential service contracts work. Also, homeowners insurance, educating them. Usually it's a that's a objection from a first-time home buyer. So that's where explaining, you have to maybe back up and spend a lot more time just on insurance. Usually the deductible is going to be, sometimes it's just a few $100s. I rarely know people that have actually ever had to pay a deductible for their roof. Like roofs, people get new roofs all the time, people buy insurance. And that's one of the most expensive things you got on a house: roof, foundation, and heating and air. So we've got these home warranties that cover your heating and air. So you've got a $75 service call that, and you just call one phone number. You've got, for the roof, your homeowner's insurance. And for foundation, that's where I come in, is that I want to make sure you're in an area that's not prone to foundation problems. We're going to be looking at houses that are not prone to foundation problems. So we've got you covered on every base there.
Well, we're set up on all the websites like Trulia.com and Realtor.com, and we're just going to search for a home on our own and save 3%.
Great. Okay. I totally understand that. I would do the same thing if I were you, if I thought I could find a house. But here's the reality of these online portals. The big portals are the ones that have the most searches set up, and that's Trulia, Zillow, Homes.com, and Realtor.com. Are you on all of those?
3 of them.
3 of them. Okay. So out of those 3, how many realtors have contacted you?
So many.
Yeah, you're probably bombarded with realtors. Okay. Well, here's the reason why. I always tell people, follow the money. Those companies, the way they stay in business is that realtors pay for those leads and that they resell your information. So every time you fill out one of those forms, a registration form online, then you're basically, that information is being resold to a realtor. So they're not selling homes. Those sites are not in the business of even finding new houses. They're in the business of selling leads to realtors. So that's why actually David Weekley's in a lawsuit with them right now. I was at a meeting just a few weeks ago, and because they put inaccurate data on there. Trulia and Zillow are actually 2 of the worst. And the accuracy rating on Trulia and Zillow and Homes.com, Trulia and Zillow are the worst. The accuracy of those, up to 40% of those listings are old or inaccurate. Right. How annoying is it to find a property that's sent to you and then it not even be accurate information? And we get that complaint all the time. So that's another reason the MLS Gateway is so important to use that. And I would delete all those other searches because they're generally not as fast or they're not accurate. And I want to make sure you're getting the most accurate information. And then the other thing is that they, the realtors that they're selling leads to, you know, they don't always have the most information on properties in that area. And these are the things that I'm doing to find more properties in that area. There's no online site that has that. So generally 80%, you can say about 80% of the properties are going to be on there. But if you want the extra 20%, and usually the best ones, and that's where my job comes in, is to find the ones that are not online. Because they're not online until they've already been listed in MLS. And then, even then, it's not immediately after they've been listed in MLS. So you're only looking at, like I said, 80% of the properties at best, and it's the ones that are left over.
I just don't know if we're ready to make such a big financial decision right now.
Right.
We're just kind of getting our finances together and we're just not sure about that.
Okay. And is it the down payment, or is it the monthly payment, or the commitment?
It's just the commitment and
Commitment.
just kind of getting our credit
Right.
prepared.
Okay. So this, again, first-time home buyer, commitment's a big deal. This is the biggest purchase many people will make in their life, is their first home. And this is where it's so important to ask these questions in the counseling session, because you can flush this out before they find a house and then get cold feet. So the way, and this is a question I was asked a lot, or not necessarily asked it as directly as that. Sometimes you can just feel it. Sometimes you can just tell. They're not calling you back, or they're not excited to look. They're kind of feel guilty telling you no, they don't want to look. So that's when you feel that, and that's where your intuition comes in, is that you have to really educate them and reaffirm their commitment. So how do you do that? Supporting documentation, supporting evidence of why buying a home is such a great investment. I would find, honestly, there's two references I make, or I used to make all the time, to first-time home buyers, and they're YouTube videos. It's Warren Buffett and Peter Lynch. I'd write those down and I would find those videos. Warren Buffett on the housing market, Peter Lynch on the housing market. Or first-time, maybe you Google Peter Lynch, first-time home buyer, and Warren Buffett housing market or buying a home. And I guarantee you'll find it. But Peter Lynch was the founder of the Magellan Fund, the largest mutual fund ever in history. And this was even back in the 90s. And I remember he was interviewed by a reporter, and she said, you know, Peter, what for someone, a savvy investor right now, what's the best thing for them to invest in? And he said, what, or she said, for an investor that's just getting started in the market, what's the best financial investment that they can make? And Peter Lynch, who owns the biggest hedge fund in the world, says their first home. It's always going to be a better investment than anything in the financial market, than anything, any other commodity or index fund or mutual fund, anything. It's always going to be their first home. And he said that emphatically, and that's the same response you'll get from any financial guru on Wall Street, is your first home is always going to be your best investment. Now, why is that? Well, it's because Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are government subsidized fund. You know, the interest rates right now, the government interest rates that you get, and when you can borrow that much money without hardly any credit, you know, people in Wall Street and people that have more money, they have to have very strict credit to be able to have credit lines established and buying power. To where someone right out of college with a job, has the buying power to where they can buy this huge asset with very little money down. That's what keeps our economy going. It's a big part of our economy is the housing market. So that's why first-time home buyers are really, are typically the first investment is the best. Also, Warren Buffett, you know, he said this about 5 years ago. If he had his choice of anything to invest in, he'd buy, you know, like several million homes, I think is what he said. And he ended up buying real estate brokerages instead. But that was because he had so much confidence in the housing market. And sure enough, you know, it's turning out. So give them stories like that. The other thing that you want to explain is my job as a realtor is to mitigate your risk. So I want to make sure I'm reducing your risk as much as possible. And if there's no risk, then what's the harm in moving forward? So what's the risk in buying a home? You know, let's look at this from a different approach. Let's look at the upside. We've got appreciation that's it's easy to document and approve. prove that this property is going to appreciate, even if it's half of what it has been the last 2 years, even if it's only 6% a year. Still, let's look over the next 10 years, what kind of a nest egg, what that'll do towards your dream home. And then let's look at the worst case scenario, the downside. The downside is you lose your job. Downside is you, your wife dies. You know, what's worse? Let's really talk about worst case scenario. That's where your first home generally is a great rental property. I still have my first home today, and I haven't seen it in over 10 years. It's in Oklahoma, and it's an ACH that goes into my account every month. I haven't seen it in years. And that's typical with a lot of first-time home buyers. If they keep their home, it's like a savings account. It's just, if you build equity and you accumulate equity every month. If you use a management company to manage it, you never have to meet the buyer. You don't have to sign any papers. It's just done. And we also have a property management company, so we can do the same thing for you. And if you're a previous client or an existing client of ours, then we usually work with you even on the fees. So it's a win-win. There's nothing but upside potential here, and it's really hard to find downside potential, or any downside risk. Does that make sense? Okay. What else?
Well, that's all I have.
Oh,
Ready
all
to
right.
sign the.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you for your patience. We ran a little bit over time, but hopefully this will help you. And always make sure you're using the most recent materials that are in Back Agent, which is the Waller Group Buyer Script Book and the Waller Group Buyer's Guide template and the vendor list. Have a great week.